Isn't it about time you did something with that 1989 Vogue SE that's been sitting outside your workshop since Noah was a lad? Just be sure that you're subscribed. If you're not, why not? If you find yourself you've been unsubscribed, yeah, YouTube does it. It does it to everyone. A lot of the motoring channels seem to be getting the rough end of the YouTube algorithm. Anyway, doesn't matter. I'm doing it for shits and giggles. If you fancy supporting the channel, then there's a PayPal me link thing scrolling down here. And all donations are really gratefully received. If you want me to spend the money on beer, then please, in the description when you use the PayPal me link, say, buy yourself a beer, Richard. And I damn well will. And if you fancy contacting me, then churchhouseclassics, and that's all one word, @gmail.com. Enjoy the video. Right, it's time to start this thing up. So I have routed all the fuel lines through. I have connected all the electrics up. I have topped the cooling system up with cold water. Cold water, plain water. Really, I'm just charging the battery now. Lobbed a fair few gallons of fuel into the boot. To the tank. That's all gone in. It's all connected up. I'll just check I connected up the electrics. Tank is not connected yet. We'll need to do that. So it looks like I've connected up the level sensor but not the pump. That's not too much of a problem. And then really, I think what I'm probably going to do then is, well, I'll show you, but I'm going to bypass the relay so that we send 12 volts direct to the pump and we'll get fuel running through the rail. And we'll see if we've got any leaks. Well, as is to be predicted, we're having a few challenges. Not horrendous challenges, but challenges all the same. So the ignition goes on. Starter motor's not working, and when I find the starter relay, oh hang on, that's it. Let's put the starter relay back in again for this particular test, Richard, shall we? So, pop the starter relay back in, silly arse, and we're getting no start option. So what the way that the starter relay will work is it will take a feed, and if I don't know if we can do this, we do it with the tripod. So we've got ignition on. Let's take out, and then what I'll do is I'll bridge the input and the output, and the starter should turn. Right, so the starter's turning, so we know that the supply is good. What we then do is we look at one of these wires will be from the so that wire, if I go from that wire, from the ignition switch, I could test also the ignition switch circuit. So if I go to that one there, I think that will work. Right, so we know the ignition switch is good. So I'm suspecting what's happening here is the relay is not getting an earth. And the relay earth, in this particular case, will be to the inhibit switch on the gearbox. Which is why the top cover's out on the gearbox, because the inhibit switch connector is just there and it actually sits on the front of the gearbox. And for the sake of drilling out a couple of really gnarly looking pop rivets, I thought I'd take it apart and see if we couldn't work out what was going on. Now, the same switch, I understand, for inhibit also does reverse. So if I go into reverse, I'm not going to attempt to start, of course, and ignition on. Yeah, we've got reverse lights. Also got brake lights. Or are they lights? No, they're brake lights. Why's the brake lights on? Let's reset the brake light plunger. Right, I should have reset that. Brake lights are still on, good. Right, don't worry about brake lights. We know reverse lights are working, so I can then go back and out of reverse, and we should be reverse lights off, which we are. Don't worry about brake lights. It's about to do that in a minute. But we have no start. So what I'll do next, let me make up. So on the relay position, and this is the start relay here, this black and orange wire is the wire on the circuit. I know this is 1993, but it's not that much different. The key differences are in the power distribution. If I go, here we are. So we have got ignition switch, crank fuse, starter solenoid relay. Comes in on the white and red. Black and orange will be the earth side. Orange and brown, and I think it's just brown and orange on this particular case, and brown and red. So brown and red goes from this relay through to the starter motor. So when I connect that to that, does that make any sense? So when I connect this feed here, which is constantly live via on a later car, it'll be via a fusible link, but on this car it's from a terminal post, goes through to the brown and red, the starter turns. Okay, if I connect that one to that one, okay, and then just turn the starter to the start position, the starter turns. I don't want to do it for too long because I'll overload the ignition switch, which is why the relay's in here. So now, by all this rationale, if I was to provide an earth for the relay and the circuit works, we know it's something to do with this black and yellow wire, or black and orange, black and yellow wire. So let's get that set up. So on the back of the block here, hardwired a relay in, and we have now got an ignition system. The problem is I don't yet have a spark. If I don't have a spark, then I'm not going to have a feed to the fuel pump. So I'm going to rig up a test rig. So we've got ignition amplifier and distributor here. I should be able to, if I put a jump wire on the back of the starter solenoid, which I can get up to here, so I can turn this, crank the engine while it's in here, and then I can, in theory, crank the engine while I give voltage to the ignition coil and see if we can't get it working. Well, that turned to be a relatively simple problem. The negative terminal to the coil, sorry, the negative terminal, yes, the negative signal wire to the ignition coil was incorrect. I need to be sure that these wires are actually on the right terminals, because I've never actually been near this thing on the ignition circuit. And it did have some fairly extensive problems with the ignition beforehand. So let us disconnect the positive terminal and check we've got voltage to this with the ignition turned on. Ignition on. Ignition's on, and this should have voltage. This is just the plain white wire, and it has. Well, there's no voltage to that. Right, I'm going to turn the ignition off before I put that back on again, otherwise I'll risk giving myself a shock. So we can reconnect that back up to the ignition coil. So it had a poor signal wire from the circuit that comes from the ignition amplifier. So now, if I run this lot through here, I'm just going to put the ignition coil back over here so it's in a reasonably safe place for it to sit. Oh, God help us. Back's starting to hurt. Your back's saying, huh, fucking around in this still, are you? So, where are we? There we are. So you've got a female spade connector and a male spade connector. I'm not worrying about the fuel feed at the moment. I don't actually want this thing to fire up, but we could actually test that the fuel is coming through, which is that wire there. So that can sit there now. And now, ignition on. Right, ignition's on. you come over here, and we've got the wire, and we've got the spark. I'll be honest, I wasn't expecting that. Throttle's jammed open. Right, throttle's now better. Let's wind the throttle so the throttle is loose, because that's why it revved like fuck then. It started. Right, ignition off. Let's reconnect that spark plug lead. Now, this started up using my dummy wire. Now, before it gets all too hot down there, knowing it starts now, and knowing that I'm getting a spark off it, because this thing has always been a complete bastard to start. And then it's been in my yard for 3 years, and I think we might have found that it was a dodgy connection to the ignition coil. I know the timing was out on this as well, because when the car first came in, I identified that the distributor was a tooth out. Right, so let's let that cool down again, and then connect up the starter solenoid again. We've still got the problem with the inhibit switch. Now, what am I going to do with that? Tell you what I'm going to do. We've got this black and yellow wire, so I need to find out what the interlock relay is first and foremost. I'm going to do that in the book tonight, and whether that is even applicable to this age of car, because that's the position switch, which is over there on the side of the gearbox, and it's a black and yellow wire which ultimately will go through to ground distribution. So when we're in park or neutral, it goes through to ground, and that's how the relay gets its earth. But you'll notice this ominous word here as well. Now, there was an alarm on this car, which I've removed all the wiring from, but quite why it's not providing an earth, I'm going to guess it's going to be the inhibit switch to start off with. It started. Right, so thank you, Mr. White Bit of Wire. Shan't be needing your services much more. There will be a series on the midget, by the way, in case you're wondering, if you haven't seen it already. Now, reconnected up the starter solenoid wire. That's all I've done. When it starts, just check the oil light did come on. Yep. We might have a blow on the exhaust. Radiator low. A blow on the exhaust. There's definitely a blow on the exhaust. Just about hear it. If I reconnect this now. And this is the ignition timing. It's the next thing. That should now extinguish that. Yeah, that's done that. Oh, I might have to video this for the customer. I'll edit this chunk of video and I'll extract the bit with the first cold start, which I'll send over to the customer as well, but at least he gets the It Lives video which I like to do to all of my customers. It's alive! I don't know what is leaking down there though. I'll have to get the torch down there and just check that's not oil coming out of the... No, I just think it's all sorts of shit all over the place. I'll work out where the exhaust is blowing as well, because that's going to obviously need fixing. That's quite noisy at the moment. Right, I've set the ignition timing. Disappointingly, the EFI warning light, the big orange exclamation symbol, came up on the dash, so I turned it off. Now, what I really want to do is to see if this thing moves. It'd be nice if it does. If I could turn it around then. You can go over, where can you go? You're going to have to go over here, I'm afraid, because otherwise the sun will be shining straight at you. You can go there. Will it move? Oh my God. Now, as soon as there's any kind of acceleration, the EFI warning comes back on again. So I really need to plug my computer into that. But as you've seen, it moves. Oh yes. Right, there's no warning light up yet, but what I'm finding interesting here is fuel temperature's good, fuel map is okay, idle duty cycle's okay, the bypass position is about right, there is no MAF reading, which is weird. Why is there no MAF reading at all? So we've got two problems here. MAF reading. Oh no, hang on a sec, we'll go direct now, we're getting 34%, so I'll just double check that against, I must have clicked off direct there. What's worrying though is throttle position sensor is all over the place. So the throttle position sensor does not respond correctly to the throttle position. Now let's turn off for a second. So the throttle position sensor is that chappy right there, and there's the connector. I suspect it's not happy. So first and foremost, I'll try a different throttle position sensor, and if we can prove it's the throttle position sensor, then I'll just I'll order another one. Airflow meter appears to be okay. I'll just double check that against the baseline. But no throttle position sensor is not going to help it, because as you're driving then, the ECU is not going to be able to detect the how far open the throttle is, but it will be picking up a signal on the increased airflow through the airflow meter. The two won't correlate, and so then the ECU warning will come on, which I think is what's happened. So let me get another throttle position sensor. This is the throttle position sensor out of my car, and now ignition on, and if I just push the throttle down to halfway. Let's turn the ignition on first, Richard. Right, ignition's on, and now we'll push the throttle pedal down halfway and then to the bottom and then halfway and then let go. That's all good. Well, it already sounds a lot happier. Already. Throttle response is instant. Right, so throttle position sensors fucked then. So let me repeat that test now, because I know the throttle position sensor I took off the car was not behaving, but sometimes just breaking and remaking the connector will fix it. There was also an awful lot of crud and white powder around this. Now the throttle position sensor itself, it takes direct linkage off the end of the throttle shaft that goes through the intake to the plenum and turns this, which then sends a signal back down these wires to the ECU. So let me plug this one back in again and see what happens. Right, so the customer's unit put back on the car now, and well, that's good news. It's working now. What's it like maximum? So maximum 95%, minimum 4%. Is that 4%? 6%. I'm wearing the wrong glasses. Half throttle, 50%. Right, so it could just have been that connection. Except it doesn't sound anywhere near as happy. It's responding better. I'm sure it was sounding smoother on mine. Now the airflow meter on this is 33% and the bypass position 23%. So let's go and check those against the documentation. Interestingly, the park neutral select appears to be working. So we just double check that. In fact, I can't because I've got the pedal box and everything in there. I want to really just double check that the selector is working. Then I know the inhibit switch is working, and I know that the problem lies elsewhere when it comes to the issue that we've got with it not starting. Right, okay, that's good news anyway. It's better, but it's not better, if you get my drift. That needs to go back on my car again. I think now probably just breaking and remaking that connection may have fixed the problem. We'll see. And I completely forgot to video it, but took the safety pedal lock off, got in the car, started it up with the rover gauge on, looking at the park neutral selection, moved it into reverse, and it said drive/reverse. Into neutral, it said park/reverse, sorry, park/neutral. Into drive, it then said drive/reverse. So the inhibit switch on the gearbox is good, which is great news because they're bloody expensive. So I think next thing on this really, I need to put the reinforcing piece that goes around here, needs to go in, because that is nowhere near strong enough for that, and we really do not want the bonnet flying open. Now that's kind of done the key thing there. Quite pleased with that. These ignition coils, they're not great for these engines, by the way, folks. Really not great. Could do an awful lot better than that, but I thought that was a scratch then for a second, but it's not. It's a spider's web. Right. Dealing with the exhaust blow on this. So had the engine running, and the blow I could really feel past this down bolt here, which is actually loose. Not only is it loose, but the stud's loose too. So I strongly suspect there's some ham-fisted gibbery going on here. Now, I managed to get one of the nuts undone. There's three of them. So someone's been in there relatively recently, because that's not that old a nut. And then the second one. Oh, cheers to that, chaps. Thanks a fucking bunch. So now we are into getting the manifolds off territory, which normally really would not be a problem. But, and I say a big but here, someone's not used the lock tabs on here. So I suspect what will have happened is they will, you can almost certainly guarantee it, will have used thread lock. I had this problem with Dale's car, tried to remove the tubular manifolds off his car. Every single bolt had been thread locked the entire depth of the thread. So incredible amounts of heat were required, and I ended up, I just could not get one out, one on this side on Dale's car, so that's going to be coming into the workshop for me to see if I can't drill the bolt out with the head in situ. But to be honest, it's probably going to be a head off job in order to get the fucking thing out. So yeah, I'm delighted about that. Anyway, I'm not going to video this because my channel will surely be demonetised with the amount of profanity that is about to occur. It's a nice quiet day here on the estate. Nice, quite a pleasant day. September, middle of September. I want this done. So I'm going to lob a bit of heat onto each of these bolts using the map gas and see if we can't melt any thread lock that is there. Now obviously the four top ones dead easy, the four bottom ones are going to be a bit more of a struggle. Once the manifold's off, then I can deal with the broken stud. Right, it's one out. A couple of observations. First and foremost, the thread is knackered on this. I don't know what sort of bolt it is. Secondly, thread locked up to the shank. You see the remains of it in the thread here. There's a certain class of mechanic, be it amateur or otherwise, who just needs to be banned from working anywhere near threadlock. A dab on the threads, folks. A dab. Just the slightest dab. You don't need to dip the whole fucking thing into threadlock. And then when the bolt looks like that, when the threads look like that, it's probably time either to chase the thread out, or, you can see all the threadlock on the end there as well, or replace the bolt. You're doing no one any favours at all with that sort of fuckhousery.